Good morning. Our hand today is going to be 5-6. This hand was played a while ago, 2017. So I am on the button, and we have a mid-position player, open raise at 3 big blinds. I have 19 hands on him, unfortunately. So we don't really know how he plays. He is right now playing 22-22, so I'm going to guess he's going to be somewhat of a reasonable range. This is 21%. I think making it just Broadway, suited aces, something like this is probably okay. We can kind of look at, some of the other 20%. I think maybe that. Get rid of the Jack 10 off. Let's add these other pocket pairs. Let's do that. Let's say that's about 21%. That might be good. And then it folds to me on the button, and I just called. Now let's talk about this, because this actually isn't a calling hand. Maybe a 3-bet. I mean, according to hand range charts, it's not a call. So, open up a new one. So if we look at what we have, this is button versus cutoff. The gray is the calling range. Red is the 3-bet range. So you can see 5-6 is just part of the raise first in stat. Mid position's not even, again, it's part of the raise first in stat, but it's not part of the calling or 3-betting range. Wouldn't even necessarily call it a fringe hand. So this is kind of like the current ranges that we're kind of looking at. In the past, we can go to the button range, button versus cutoff range. 5-6, again, isn't part of like the calling range at all. It's just outside. And that's against the cutoff. And then the mid position, we don't now, versus the cutoff, you could see 7-6, 8-7 could be raises. And I think that's what this hand could be used for. So don't really have a good range to go off of, because this is just kind of, how are we playing? How does the table feel? Maybe the table is feeling awfully loose, awfully passive. I think we have to play it against specific players, and this isn't it. So, I think I would look at a player that tends to be maybe like this tight or so, and then somebody that has a c-betting range that's like c-bet stat of like 50% or less on the flop, or somebody that has, I guess, the regular c-betting stat, let's say up 70% 70% on the flop, and then it drops down to, let's say, 30 or 40% on the turn. So that allows me then to play this hand with a couple different plans. Plan number one, just flop big and then go from there. That's not going to happen that frequently, so we always have that plan B, which is we're going to call, see what this player does. If he calls, or if he c-bets on the flop, and his typical c-betting percentage is usually pretty low, then he hit that flop, and we could just get rid of our hand if we don't have any sort of draw. If his c-bet, if he doesn't c-bet in that case, then we can attack on the flop and try to get him off his hand. If he has a c-bet stat that's pretty high on the flop but real low on the turn, then we call here, planning to call the c-bet on the flop, and then when he checks the turn, then we attack. Then we attack at that point. So we've kind of have two plans to go forward. Now, I think today I probably wouldn't call with a 5-6, because I'd be worried that if I called, then we're going to have one of the blinds call, and that would just kind of ruin our plan moving forward. So, if we know both blinds are tight, we could probably make this call. 5-6 again is kind of weak, but we could also use this as a raise. If he has a high fold 3-bet stat, we could raise this up. If he calls, then hey, if he calls, we still have some draws, and it's unlikely that we're blocked by any hands, but that we're dominated. So let's say this is our typical calling range. Actually, that was probably our old calling range, something like this. I'm going to leave the 7-6 because I may have raised it. Actually don't like that range anymore. So technically we shouldn't have this hand in our range, but maybe it is. Maybe we decided to throw it in. So we'll move forward with this. So both blinds folded, and we take a flop. Flop is Jack 6-3. Now, with our plan of attacking if villain shows weakness, really matters on the board texture. So this is a texture where we could continue. So if he has a high cbet stat on the flop and then a low one on the turn, I think this is a board that's good. But if we had two high cards, two Broadway cards, I think that's less likely that we could attack, because now it's more likely that he has a pair, either top pair or second pair. Here, I think he could have top pair with the jack, but it's unlikely that he's going to have a second or a third pair here. So the board texture, I think, is going to favor us making that type of play. Here, we've got a middle pair, we've got backdoor straight draw, and we have a backdoor flush draw. And with it just being jack high, it doesn't really give us any reason to pause or to think that we're completely crushed. So villain 3 bets. He makes a c-bet. It's about a half pot c-bet. We're going to say that he's going to c-bet most of his ranges here, most of his pairs, most of his draws. We're going to give him the overcards on there. So pair plus with overcards, that's 71%. That's probably about right, because this board's kind of dry. Personally, I mean, I agree with that. I think I might mix in some checks with like ace jack and king jack. I think I would mix in some checks. Not always. Again, I need some of those in my c-betting range as well. But this is a fairly dry board. I don't expect this player, me, to really hit it too hard. And if I had a jack, we just blocked our top pair hand. So I think this is a board we're not. If we were in position, I think we're c-betting about 100% of the time on this board. But since we're out of position, I don't think we can bet as much, because it's going to if he calls, it's going to put us in an awkward situation on the turn. Obviously, on the turn, any overcard to a jack would be favorable to the out of position player's range. A 10, I don't even think a 10, 9, 8, or 7 is going to be that good for their range. I think that's going to help our range. So you could kind of see, when you think about what cards help ranges and what cards don't help ranges, I think the Broadways are going to help his. I think all the rest are probably going to help our range. Any of the hand, like the small, maybe like 2, 4, and 5 might actually help our range a little bit more. So I think we have a c-bet stat. What are we going to do? So we have an opportunity to raise, and I think this is a great spot to raise. Raise. We're not going to have a huge number of draws here, and I think that's okay, because what we're doing is we're raising to try to avoid that queen, king, or ace coming out on that turn. And even if we get called, we still have backdoor draws, and we've got a middle pair. I think this would be a good spot here to raise and have villain really kind of give up with hands that have some equity against us, hopefully including those overcards. So what kind of hands are we going to be raising with? We're going to be raising with sets. So yeah, we would have sets. Top pair, I think we're raising these middle cards, middle pairs. So I think we're raising, and I think also 5s and 4s probably what we can raise. I don't really think we're having a drawing a calling range here. I think if we play, we should be playing for a raise. And I'm gonna guess I didn't. I'm gonna guess I didn't raise, but I think we're gonna raise. I think we should be raising here with basically our entire range. And again, we're attacking. Villain might not. Villain might just give up, which gives us our equity. But what we don't want, when you think about these lower pairs, top pair, what we have showdown equity with ace jack and king jack. Hey, we could be good. We may be folding out some of our equity. However, what happens if the turn brings a 10? What happens if the turn brings a queen or a king or an ace? That really hurts us. So I think this is a raise or fold situation. I don't think we're really going to have a call. I think a call is kind of a weak play. I think we want to be aggressive here. And if he calls, he calls. But I think we would do better if we raise here. Is that what I did? I'm guessing no. No, I didn't. I just called. So I think that's a mistake. That's our mistake number one. Well, I guess you could say number two. The flop, I think, is kind of questionable. So we're going to say more than likely I was probably calling all of these instead of raising, even the sets. I think at that time in 2017, I'm thinking, well, I've got a set. I don't want to raise them off the hand. I'm going to slow play it. And right now, I don't think that's a good play. I can't justify calling with a lot of our hands. I think calling will hurt us in the long run. So 4 spades. So this is the reason why it would be good. If we raise and he calls, hey, we've just picked up now the open ender and the flush draw. We have even more equity. We are building pots, building a solid pot. And he called. He could have easily, there's a lot of players that put in the bet and then they can't fold because they have money out there. So if we bet now and he folds, he could be folding hands as strong as 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. He could be folding jack 10, jack queen. He could be folding, king queen, ace king type hands that have, some equity against us. And for what we show 6 high, we show a pair of 6s with a lot of draws. So what does villain do? Villain checks. So once he checks, I am going to eliminate these strong hands, and I'm gonna put in all of these weak hands. I kind of think a flush draw would have bet. And probably the open ender would have bet too. I think those are all on there. So we're going to take out the flush draw, open ender. Gut shots, I think we're going to leave them in there because they're part of that low pair. So you can see he has a very weak hand now. Out of this entire range that he's checking, 31% is his pocket pair below the top card, which we are now, we're behind that. So once he checks, again, we should be betting. We should be attacking here. Pot's 15 or almost 15 big blinds. We should be attacking with like a 10, at least 10 big blinds, probably 11 or 12 big blinds is what we should be attacking here, which I'm glad I did. So it looks like I did do 10.5, so 2/3, maybe 3/4. And here, I think I would be doing it with my entire range. I would be betting my entire range here. With the plan of a favorable river card, making that same play. Villain calls, which is surprising. So the question is, would he continue with this flush draw with all of his flush draws? I would assume his nut flush would have been raised. So if he has a flush draw, I'm gonna say it's something like that. Small number of flushes. I would assume he would have continued betting his open ender, but maybe he's looking at it saying he doesn't want to bet and get raised. I think that's the other aspect. So yeah, I just think if you've got trips, if you got an overpair, you want to continue to fire because you have me that could call with Jack X hands, could call with flush draws, could call with straight draws, could possibly, it's now called with a gut shot if I have the 6. I think there's a lot of hands that I could call that are behind. So I think you're betting for value. So what hands does he call? I don't think he's continuing with no made hand. Not sure if he's doing it with the weak pair, but maybe the middle pair and the pocket pair less than the top card. Maybe he's calling because he doesn't believe us, and then he has that flush draw. So really, really narrow range is what I would think. 9 of diamonds falls. That I think actually helps us. So villain checks. I think he's checking 100%. Minus the set. Well, yeah, set's gonna be slow playing. I think that's typical. Once you check that turn, check call the turn, I think you're going to check and hope that myself bets. Now I need to fire it out. I missed all my draws. I still have middle pair. Pot's 35. I think I should be betting about 30 big blinds here. 25 to 30 big blinds. Continue the pressure. I didn't do that. And I think that's a mistake because if I continue the pressure, even with all of my misdraws, I think we've got a mix of values here. I think we're betting our set. We're going to be firing. I think probably ace jack. I don't know. I think king jack probably has some showdown value here. I think tens probably has some showdown value here. So, and the 7s and 8s. Let's color code these. I think 7s and 8s. What do we think? If we bet, what do we think he's going to call? Yeah, if he calls, he's going to be calling with all of those weak hands. So I kind of think 7s and 8s might be more of a showdown value. I think weak pairs, the 6s, the 5s, we're going to turn those into a bluff. I think we have to, because I think if we bet and he calls, we're gonna be behind to those. And I think the same thing with 7s, 8s. If we bet and he calls, we're gonna be behind those. And that includes like the weak pair. So I'm gonna turn that. Yeah, no, we don't have a shot to win if we check behind and he has a pair. So we're gonna turn those into a bluff. I think these middle pairs we can win. Top pairs, ace jack, we're going for value. Maybe king jack. Yeah, maybe king jack. King jack's kind of questionable, but sets and 2 pair, we're definitely going for value there. So that would be our betting range, and then we've got the middle stuff. And again, if he calls, I think he's calling with jacks, maybe calling with an under pair, but we should keep up. I think the greatest thing, if we bet and he folds, hey, that's awesome. We just won with 6s, but we didn't. We checked behind, and villain shows king jack, which I don't think. I think we excluded that because we assumed on the turn he would have continued betting. But maybe he got scared. So maybe he would have continued betting ace jack, but not any of the others because of his kickers. He's worried about his kicker. And then that sets up a situation where he does have a lot more top pair, which I think for us Yeah, I think that's the reason why we have our top pair and tens we're keeping as, you know, value range. And yeah, if he's got all those, I think King Jack's again still in the middle of value bet. If I bet, do I think he's going to call? Probably. I think he's probably calling. I don't think we're getting that hand, but I think we're being aggressive, and we've picked up some stuff, and definitely we raise on the flop. He calls. The turn comes out. We bet. He probably calls, and then on the river, if we fire again, it's going to be hard for him to call. Because we've demonstrated that we have a solid hand. It's a possibility that he might give up this hand at some point in the hand because he's afraid that we have two pair or trips or something like that. That's what being aggressive is about. So overall, we didn't know if he would bet that turn. He does. And again, this is 2017. Playing trends have changed. And this is an unknown, so maybe that's how a lot of people played. They took the cbet with the top pair and then they froze up because of they're worried about kickers. So hopefully you enjoyed this hand. Definitely made some mistakes. Going to take some notes and work to improve our game. If you enjoyed this hand, look tomorrow for another.